What if the government just released hundreds of secret files with zero redactions? No blacked out pages, no missing documents, complete transparency. Sounds impossible, right? But it just happened. The Pentagon dropped 162 classified UFO files yesterday. Videos, photos, witness testimonies spanning decades. And for the first time in history, nothing was hidden. Every name visible, every document readable, every piece of evidence laid bare. The president himself called it maximum transparency. But here's what nobody's talking about. While the UFO files were flooding the internet, another set of documents remained locked away. Documents that survivors have been demanding for years. Documents that Congress legally required be released months ago. The Epstein files. And the difference between how these two releases were handled isn't just suspicious. It's a blueprint for how power protects itself. Because when you compare what the government chose to reveal about aliens versus what it's still hiding about Epstein, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. 162 UFO files, zero redactions, 3.5 million Epstein files, hundreds of pages completely blacked out. Let's start with what actually dropped yesterday. The Pentagon launched a brand new website, War.gov UFO. The page loaded with 162 files spanning nearly 80 years. Infrared footage of unidentified objects over military bases. FBI composite sketches of bronze metallic crafts materializing out of thin air. Apollo mission transcripts describing mysterious lights inside the cabin. One file detailed the 1952 Washington, D.C. sightings, where multiple radar stations tracked objects flying over the Capitol building at speeds exceeding 7,000 miles per hour. Another contained declassified Air Force reports from Project Blue Book, documenting 701 unexplained cases between 1947 and 1969. There were pilot testimonies from commercial airline captains describing near collisions with disc-shaped objects. Navy footage from the USS Nimitz encounter, showing objects dropping from 80,000 feet to sea level in less than a second. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth released a statement. These files, hidden behind classifications, have long fueled justified speculation. It's time the American people see it for themselves. FBI Director Kash Patel added that this represents unfettered access to declassified government files, a level of transparency no prior administration has delivered. The White House went even further. They announced these files would be released on a rolling basis. New batches every few weeks. And here's the key detail that matters. According to the Department of Justice's own press release, no redactions have been made to any files released under President Trump's directive. Think about that. Files about potential extraterrestrial contact, decades of military encounters, witness testimony from astronauts and pilots, all of it accessible, instantly, no clearance required. Now let's talk about what happened 5 months ago, November 2025. Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The law was clear. The Department of Justice had 30 days to release all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials tied to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Trump signed it into law. Survivors waited. The public waited. Lawmakers waited. December 19th arrived, the deadline, and the DOJ did release files, a massive dump, over 3 million pages, but something was very wrong. Pages that should have contained witness statements, completely black. Documents titled Grand Jury NY, 119 pages, every single one redacted. 3 consecutive files totaling 255 pages, fully blacked out. At least 550 pages in the initial release were entirely redacted, not partially, entirely. Let's look at specific examples. Document number 847 through 851. 5 consecutive FBI 302 interview reports. Each one marked witness interview, high-profile subject. Every single line blacked out except the date and file number. Document 1203. Title visible. Financial records, wire transfers to foreign accounts. 47 pages. Completely redacted. Not a single number visible. Document 1891. Flight manifest, private aircraft N number. The aircraft registration is visible. Everything else, black. The passenger names, the destinations, the dates, all hidden. Then there's the grand jury testimony. Under federal law, grand jury materials can be released in cases involving significant public interest, especially when the subject is deceased. Epstein is dead. Maxwell is convicted. The legal barrier for release has been met. Yet 119 pages of grand jury testimony from New York remain completely sealed. No explanation given. No legal justification provided. Just a wall of black ink. Then things got stranger. An NPR investigation in February revealed that the DOJ had withheld portions of the Epstein files specifically because they contained allegations involving President Trump. Files disappeared from the DOJ website, including a photo showing Trump at a party. When asked about it, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said the photo was removed due to concerns about those women. Hours later, after public outrage, the DOJ quietly reposted it, claiming there was no evidence that any Epstein victims are depicted. but the damage was done. Because if the concern was really about protecting victims, why were hundreds of other pages with victims' names left unredacted in the initial release? Survivors expressed fury. They pointed out that the DOJ had rushed the release so fast, it hadn't even properly reviewed which victims' identities were exposed. One survivor's full name appeared in 14 different documents. She had never consented to that information being public. Another survivor discovered her therapy records had been released without redaction, including detailed descriptions of trauma she experienced. Democratic lawmakers called it a continuing cover-up. And here's the detail that nobody can explain away. The DOJ admitted it reviewed approximately 6 million documents related to Epstein. It released 3.5 million. That means 2.5 million pages are still missing. Where are they? What do they contain? And why aren't they subject to the same transparency directive as UFO files? Congress noticed the discrepancy. Senator Ron Wyden held the Senate floor for 47 minutes in March demanding answers. He pointed to Treasury Department files showing 4,725 wire transfers totaling $1 billion flowing through Epstein's accounts. Files that the DOJ refused to include in the public release. If we can declassify every UFO sighting from the past 80 years, Wyden said, we can certainly declassify bank records showing who financed a sex trafficking operation. Representative Thomas Massey introduced a discharge petition to force the release of unredacted materials. It gained 187 signatures before the House leadership quietly buried it in committee. No vote, no debate, just silence. When reporters asked Attorney General Pam Bondi why UFO files received full transparency while Epstein files remained heavily redacted, her answer was revealing. The UFO files don't involve ongoing investigations or living individuals who could face legal jeopardy. But that's exactly the point, isn't it? The Epstein files do involve living individuals, powerful individuals, individuals who apparently still have enough influence to keep their names hidden. So let's put this side by side. UFO files, 162 documents released in one batch, 0 redactions. Government says complete transparency. New website built specifically for access, rolling releases promised, covers 80 years of history, includes military witnesses, pilot testimonies, radar data, photographic evidence, all names visible. Epstein files, 6 million documents reviewed, only 3.5 million released, hundreds of pages completely redacted. Files mentioning Trump withheld, survivors say cover-up, grand jury materials still sealed. Wire transfer records hidden, flight manifests blacked out, witness interviews entirely redacted, 2.5 million pages still missing. You see the problem. When the subject is aliens, unidentified craft, and decades-old military sightings, transparency is suddenly easy. But when the subject involves billionaires, politicians, private jets, and allegations of trafficking minors to powerful men, transparency becomes complicated. The government didn't struggle to declassify UFO files that span from 1947 to 2025, but it can't figure out how to release Epstein documents without hiding the names of the men involved. And look at how the media covered these two releases. The UFO files dominated cable news for 72 hours straight. Every major network ran special segments, breaking news alerts, expert panels discussing implications for humanity. The White House press secretary fielded questions about extraterrestrial life for 3 consecutive briefings. Meanwhile, the Epstein file redactions got buried. A few articles in niche outlets. Brief mentions on late-night segments. No congressional hearings broadcast live. No press conferences demanding accountability. The story that should have sparked national outrage barely registered as a footnote. And that's not an accident, that's strategy. Because here's what this moment really reveals. The UFO disclosure isn't just about transparency. It's about control of the narrative. It's about deciding which scandals get attention and which ones get buried. And then there's the timing. Trump signed the Epstein Transparency Act in November 2025. By December, the heavily redacted files dropped. By February, investigations revealed the DOJ was withholding materials. By March, Trump started calling the Epstein case a hoax. And now, in May 2026, the UFO files arrive. Perfectly timed. Perfectly distracting. It's not that UFO disclosure isn't significant. It is. But when disclosure of one topic happens with no resistance, while disclosure of another topic faces endless delays, redactions, and excuses, you have to ask the obvious question. Which truth is more dangerous to powerful people? The possibility that unidentified objects have been observed by military personnel, or the documented evidence that a trafficking network operated for decades with connections to some of the most influential figures in the world. This isn't the first time a government has used spectacular disclosure to bury uncomfortable truths. In 1998, the Clinton administration released thousands of pages about Cold War-era human radiation experiments on the same day the Monica Lewinsky scandal exploded. In 2004, The Abu Ghraib torture photos surfaced the same week the Bush administration declassified documents about UFO sightings in the 1960s. In 2013, Edward Snowden's NSA revelations competed with a sudden release of JFK assassination files. The pattern repeats because it works. Give the public something big enough to chase and they'll stop asking about what you're hiding. For the women who survived Epstein's network, this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's their lives. They've spent years demanding one thing, the full truth. They were told the files would be released. They were told transparency was coming. Instead, they got pages so heavily redacted they can't even recognize their own testimony. They got a government that claims it's protecting them while simultaneously exposing their names in other documents due to rushed reviews. And they got an administration that promised accountability but delivered distraction. One survivor told PBS, "We have to do things differently and not let this happen again. But how can anything change if the evidence remains hidden?" Another survivor, speaking anonymously to NPR, said, "They released everything about UFOs, everything, but they won't release the names of the men who hurt us. That tells you exactly where their priorities are. Here's what this moment reveals. Transparency isn't a principle, it's a choice. And that choice depends entirely on who benefits and who gets hurt. When disclosure serves as spectacle, when it distracts, when it involves subjects that don't threaten anyone currently in power, it flows freely. But when disclosure threatens to expose networks of influence, when it risks implicating people still alive, still powerful, still protected, suddenly the process becomes complicated. The UFO files prove the government can release classified material quickly and completely when it wants to. The Epstein files prove the government won't do the same when the stakes involve accountability for the powerful. And that's the gap where justice dies. The Department of Justice has the technology to redact specific names while preserving context. They've done it in countless other cases. They could release the Epstein files with individual names blacked out but all other information visible. Flight dates, locations, amounts transferred, witness descriptions of what happened, but they're not doing that. They're redacting entire pages, entire documents, entire categories of evidence. That's not protection, that's erasure. So here's the question for everyone watching. Are we really going to let this slide? Are we going to let one story drown out the other? Because that's exactly what's happening. Right now, social media is flooded with UFO footage. And while people debate whether we're alone in the universe, the Epstein files sit buried under redactions and excuses. Both stories matter. But only one involves survivors still waiting for justice. Only one involves names that powerful people don't want revealed. And only one proves that transparency in America depends on who you're exposing. If you think survivors deserve answers, don't let this story fade. Share this video. Demand the full release. Keep the pressure on. Because the moment we stop asking, the files stay sealed forever. Call your representative. Ask them why UFO files got 0 redactions while Epstein files got hundreds of blacked out pages. Ask them why 25 million documents are still missing. Ask them why Congress passed a transparency law that the DOJ is actively undermining. Because they're counting on you to forget. They're counting on the UFO spectacle to be enough. They're counting on your attention span being shorter than their ability to wait you out. Prove them wrong. 162 UFO files, complete transparency. 35 million Epstein files, still redacted. The math isn't complicated. The truth is being managed, not revealed. And if we don't fight for it, we'll never see it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to keep following stories like this. Drop a comment. Do you think the Epstein files will ever be fully released? And if this made you think twice about what transparency actually means, share it. The truth is out there. But some truths are a lot easier to find than others.